Minister Viktor Orbán, good morning.
Good morning.
We have been talking for several weeks now about the fact that if the shops do not reduce their prices on their own, there may be some kind of intrusion. Why has the government lost patience now?
The thing is that we can observe a number of economic events which should have reduced the prices. Now that the president of Ukraine-Russia war, Mr. President Trump, is getting closer to peace, the signs of this have appeared in the economy. For example, there is the case of the Hungarian forint, which has repeatedly been below the 400 level compared to the euro, which means that the imported food should be cheaper than when the forint was weaker. Or I see that the world energy market has started to fall in gas prices, which is good, because this means a decrease in gas prices as the government pays for it, so it is cheaper, and a decrease in oil prices as well. I can see the impact of this on gas prices, but I do not see it in the prices. Otherwise, if the energy price is decreasing, it should have appeared in the prices, and the exact opposite is happening. So this is definitely not right, and we talked about this with the traders. They suggested a decrease in prices, but it was so minimal that it was far from the expectations of the government and from what people would have felt otherwise. So there was no other choice. We had to intervene, even if we do not like such extramural measures. But it is not just me, it is not just us in this shoe. I have seen what is going on in Europe, and I can say that this solution, which we Hungarians have chosen, is chosen by several other European countries as well. And what is included in it, if it does not lead to a good result, then it has a more severe form of interference. This also applies to a few countries in Europe.
This is an interesting question. Earlier, the government's tool was the price stop in these situations. Now, why was it decided to maximize prices in the first place?
It is complicated, but I will try to put it simply. When we talk about a food product, as we see in the shops, there are three actors behind it. There is the producer who produces it, then there is the food industry worker who processes it, and there is the trader who sells it. The producer sells the milk for 200 HOF, and the shop will get 550, 600 HOF from it. And when you apply the price stop in that case, the trader has the option of further reducing the impact of the price reduction on the worker or the buyer. In other words, he reduces the price paid by the buyer to the Hungarian farmer. When you regulate the price, you say that no matter how much you buy, what you can put on your purchase price cannot be more than 10%. It includes your expenses, and it also includes your profits. Good day. This way, you cannot further reduce the impact of this on the producers, and thus the Hungarian farmers do not suffer. This is why most European countries use the price stop. But if there is no story, and you have to regulate the price level, you have to introduce a price cap, you have to introduce an effective price, then you can further reduce the impact on the part of the traders. But the prices will be guaranteed. We are still in the middle phase.
Compared to the previous measures, there is more of a circle, where the price stop is drawn. It affects 30 product categories. What was the basis for choosing this circle?
The Ministry of Economy reviewed the entire product circle and listed the 30 basic food items. You can always argue about this, but I think that this is the reality. It has a lifespan. So the reality looks like this. These are the 30 products from which the pensioners, the family members, buy the most.
Now, from Monday to the first round, at least until the end of May, this measure is in effect. When and what effect can the buyers feel on the market?
I can already see the effect. I see a lot of share prices, and from Monday this 10% price and stop profit maximum is in effect. And from then on, I think this will appear even more clearly. We are Hungarians. Of course, the traders will come up with something. This is how it is. By the way, we will vote on it. I don't want to show the listeners the details, but once again, we are Hungarians. Everyone has an idea on how to take a government step, and the government also has an idea on what we will do, but let's not get ahead of ourselves yet.
Yes, because the critics have already drawn attention to the fact that this this may increase inflation in some cases because the shops will look for this benefit in other products. So according to them, would the government have an answer if something like this happened?
Of course, if we spread it to all food, then it is already impossible.
Inflation reduction is also important so that the value of various family supports remains, which, by the way, added a new element to the total personal income of mothers under the age of 30 last week. How does this step relate to the previously announced tax cuts?
We have built a family life model. The time will decide whether we see this well. Our belief is that the key to the birth and upbringing of children is that mothers feel safe. Of course, mothers feel most safe if they could rely on their husbands. The fact that the number of children is low and there are problems in raising them does not mean that mothers should be prioritized. It is always good if the men start the examination themselves. So it would be best if mothers could rely on healthy, strong-willed, hard-working and well-seeking men. But there is no such thing. And as the number of jobs is also large, the number of mothers who raise their children alone is also large. So I see that there is a fear in the mothers' heads about what will happen if they do not find such a husband, or life becomes such that they remain on their own. Then, suddenly, all the problems of raising children and their financial burden fall on them. And they work alongside raising children, which I think is a heroic thing, because if someone has several children and sees his wife up close, and sees how much trouble, difficulty, and strain she is going through, and someone else is working with her for 4 or 8 hours, it is a worthy recognition. So if mothers remain on their own, work and raise their children, and even the state takes away the money from them, then the financial support will certainly be weak. So we are working on this. Personally, I also think this is the key question. How can we help mothers feel safe and be able to take care of their children and give them a part of their lives to raise these children and raise a decent person from them and share the joy of family life? I want to help in this. This is what the government is working on. This is a life path. This means that a young man who has been working for the past 18 years, regardless of whether he is a boy or a girl, does not pay his tuition until the age of 25. If he is single and has a child, he does not pay his tuition until the age of 30. If he has 2 children, he does not pay his tuition for the rest of his life. This is a very large sum from the point of view of the state. We have already introduced some elements of this, and we will introduce other elements one after the other. For example, the 2-child, 40-year-old mother's personal care allowance from January 1st, then the 40 and 50-year-olds, then the 50 and 60-year-olds, and so on. And in addition to all this, because this is about mothers, there is also a system of family tax incentives. If the child is a minor, regardless of how many children there are, the father can also write down the amount determined by the tax incentives from his tax allowance, so they get additional financial assistance. I think it's hard to do more for families, and no one in the world does. So what we are talking about here is a unique world sensation, a Hungaricum, which does not exist anywhere in the world. In general, this is not how they think. The governments in Western civilization think that the income tax is a personal matter. You earn, you tax. But since I have been behind the government for 15 years, I think that this is not true. Because people do not live alone. The majority of people live in families. So we tried to make the state of the family, the fact of living in a family, based on the tax system. And this is how we got to the point with long work, that now we can introduce the closing stone. The last but not least step into the lifelong tax exemption of mothers. And with this, an economic system is created in Hungary which does not exist anywhere in the world, but a family-centric economic system.
How does the government calculate how these measures, these tax cuts, can change the situation of families?
Well, everyone has all kinds of hopes for such a step. This is why I am always among the careful ones. I think it is fair, this is the right word, that if someone adopts a child, which is not only for their own pleasure, which is undoubtedly the most important, but also for our community, for our national community, it is a key question. Are we there or not? Are we going bankrupt or not? So this is an adoption that is not only for them, although it is a personal matter, but it is important for all of us. Now, those who adopt such a child should not be in a worse financial situation than those who do not adopt such a child. I am trying to reduce the difference between the two. We can say that, of course, you adopt a child, but it will not ruin your financial situation. We are still far from that, by the way. The situation is much better than it was before, but we are not there yet. It will take a few more years, and when the whole family life model is in place, then we will be very close to being able to say that it is no longer financially worse for those who raise children than for those who do not adopt a child. In the long run, I am not in doubt, but this is a matter of life philosophy, that whoever adopts a child is better off, because what he takes away from his pocket in the short term, he immediately gets back to his heart. And if he raises a good child, and this usually happens because the majority of Hungarians are still good people, then he will break up with his mother and father when they get older. So it is not a question of long-term family life. It does not only make you happier, but it is also financially better. But until a family arrives here, it will take a long time, and then you need this family life model that the government is now offering. By the way, it is not mandatory, it is not compulsory for those who take part. Those who take part, they take part.
You also mentioned that this will raise a lot of money from all kinds of spending, and in the meantime, we see that the German economy is still weakening. In Hungary, compared to last year in January, industrial production has fallen back. At the same time, almost all elements of the 21-point economic policy plan were launched, and the government also announced new economic indicators. How can these programs counter the negative trends?
Well, when we look at 2025 as a breakthrough year, we are basing it on peace, so that's why we put up the bill, that after the American changes, not only Hungary will be on the side of peace, but the Americans too. And let's face it, their weight is even more significant. And so the world is moving towards peace, which will have positive economic effects. And we have calculated this in our spending policy and economic plans. This creates the opportunity for economic breakthrough. Now that we are in such a breakthrough, then there are simply positive and negative trends, because from the past, in the period before the breakthrough, there are still bad things, but there are already good things emerging due to the new measures. The essence of this, in my opinion, is that after we announced such economic programs, in addition to the family life model for small and medium-sized businesses, or the program of 100 factory buildings, or the housing, the access to home production, and the widening of it, there are more and more good signs, good news, which eliminate the bad news, and the proportion gradually changes every day. And in the end, the bad things from the war disappear, and the good news, good conditions, good opportunities dominate the economic life. This is how I imagine 2025.
Last week, after the EU summit, it was announced that the government will launch a referendum on joining the Ukrainian Union. Yesterday, Gergely Gulyas said that everyone will get one ballot, which will be one question. Is it possible to know what this question will be and what will be the job of the person who answers this question with this ballot?
The government has decided the technical details, the sentence itself, the only question. We did not define it. We gave it to the responsible minister to do it. Everyone has already seen the national consultation. This is the same. The difference is that now we ask people not in 10 or a few questions, but in one question. It will be as simple as a piece of wood.
Some of the voters are convinced that Ukraine will not be a member of the European Union, so this vote is unreasonable. How do you see how perfect the leadership of Brussels is to make Ukraine a member of the European Union within a few years?
Yesterday, or the day before yesterday, the President of the European Commission said in the European Parliament that even under his cycle, until 2029 or 2030, this must happen. So let's not doubt that today in Brussels, the official position is that Ukraine must be taken up as soon as possible, and they mean within a year or two. Let's not forget that another decision has also been born, because against Hungary, all other member states support the continuation of the war. So there is still a war party majority in Brussels. In the Western world, there is now a peace party majority, but there is still a war party majority, and the suggestion is very simple. The European leaders decided that Ukraine should continue to fight. Ukraine must fight. In return, it gets an accelerated membership. This destroys us. I think the whole European Union is less important to me than to Hungary. I am interested in what is going on with the Hungarians and the situation that destroys the Hungarians. So we have to talk about this seriously. Brussels is far from Ukraine, but Hungary is here for a leap, because we are talking about a neighboring country. So the consequences in our case are much more obvious, more direct, and faster. It should not be allowed that a few eggheads in Brussels, based on paper, decide whether Ukraine can be a member of the Union or not. Here we have to decide for real Hungarians living on the ground, which is our right, by the way, because according to the foundations of the European Union, no one can be a member of the European Union if the other member states do not support each other. So this is the decisive word of Hungary.
Since last week's report, there have been a lot of points of view in the Hungarian press regarding the membership of Ukraine. Financial, security, agricultural issues have also been discussed. What do you think Hungarians need to consider when they answer the question whether Ukraine should be a member of the Union or not?
Well, Hungary is a colorful species. Even one person can think several different things, not more. So I suggest that, since it is a very complex question, everyone should approach it according to their own way of thinking. So there are obviously economic issues, there are labor market issues, then there are issues related to the future of healthcare, then there are public safety issues, then there are border protection issues, and then there are all kinds of military issues. Obviously, the economic points are the closest. I can say with full responsibility that Ukraine is a member of the European Union, and it would be a disaster for the Hungarian economy.
By the way, what is the reason for the hasty membership in Brussels? You mentioned that on the other side there is also a point of view that Ukraine needs to fight. But by the way, there was a reviewer who compared it to Western Balkan countries, for example, which have been waiting for a long time to join the Union, and now it seems that they are much further away from it.
Well, Serbia could be named tomorrow morning, and it would not suffer a loss, but it would have huge economic benefits. The whole European Union, but Hungary in particular, because we are a neighboring country. Macedonia, North Macedonia, could also be named tomorrow morning. Montenegro tomorrow morning. This would be a huge economic advantage because our neighbors and countries belonging to the region would join the European Union. This would greatly expand our economic opportunities. It is not by chance that Hungary is the backbone of the Balkan states. But this is another coffee house. These countries cannot be put together in terms of their conditions, their development, their operating order, their outlook. The war with Ukraine would only bring money and not bring anything.
While the EU membership was the focus in Hungary, the European Parliament adopted a resolution on Ukraine's further support with money and weapons, which, for example, also includes that all member states' GDP, a determined part of it, should be spent on Ukraine's support. What is your opinion on this plan?
Well, madness. So I think the starting point is wrong. Of course, in the European Parliament, the majority who voted for this says that the future of Europe depends on the battlefield. But this is not true, because the future of Europe cannot depend on the battlefield, because there is no solution there. It can only depend on the negotiating table. This is why we have to strive for peace and negotiations. They don't see it that way. They want to wage war. This is also reflected in Hungarian political life. There are two types of Hungarian parties, just like in Europe. There are peaceful parties, and there are war parties. This is exactly the same as the European Union's party division. The traditional Hungarian left, let's say the DK, belongs to the European socialists. They are both war parties, and they all want the war to continue. There is the TISA party, which belongs to the European People's Party. We stepped out of it because we were tired of them. They went in there. The European People's Party is the most vulnerable, the most war party member of the European Parliament. Everyone supports the war there, including the Hungarian party. So the two Hungarian opposition parties, the DK and the TISA, although they belong to other parties, but they are all war parties. And we, Fideszes, KDNPs, and for the sake of justice, we have to mention our country, who are on the peaceful party side in the European Parliament. This is the division at home, and this is the division in Brussels.
This document, which the European Parliament accepted, calls on member states to support Ukraine more. And there is a quote in it, that it firmly condemns the Hungarian government for the threat of blocking the renewal of the EU sanctions. There is an EU summit next week. What is your response to this parliamentary decision by the heads of state and government?
At the same time, the European Parliament and the prime ministers. So those prime ministers behind whom the Socialist People's Party coalition is at home, they are war parties. Hungary and Slovakia are clearly against war. I expect a very strong and difficult debate. Now we are almost at the end of our time. I do not want to go on an adventure. But on top of that, one of the key questions of the European defense development that we will discuss as part of the Ukrainian war is where we want to finance it. Ukraine, the Ukrainian army, and our own defense industry. There are two camps in the European Union. One says, of course, we do it. Even together, everyone throws in the money. The other camp says no, but we take up huge gigatrusts together. And the whole European Union guarantees the repayment of these trusts. The Hungarian Constitution clearly states that this is not possible, or that it would only be possible if Hungary joined such a long-term lending spiral or participates in it. I think this is very dangerous if two-thirds of the parliament supports this. Therefore, the parliament must say something about this summit, in order for me to have a mandate to represent one or the other position. In addition, by the way, the member states of the European Union must jointly take up trusts, lend and lend, not only our children, but also our grandchildren. I don't think Hungary should take part in this. Let's take part in joint defense, in joint defense policy. Let's throw in the money in the interest of joint defense, but let's not do it together.
I also asked Minister Viktor Orbán about the methods of inflation reduction, and he said that it is not possible.